We have a plan for how to deal with the complexity of the different organizations. But before I talk about the plan, let me just say that the purpose of this session is to sort of like that we get to know each other better, not beyond just the acronyms. And so it's not just about you who are members or administrators of other organizations, but it's even between ourselves that we get to know each other better. Before I introduce the plan of action, I would like to thank very much Professor Satoko Fujiwara for her meticulous planning of this session, and in particular the most helpful handout that you have in your hands, which is extremely informative, and it also will enable our speakers to focus rather on the questions that they have been asked to respond to, rather than spending time introducing their organizations. So, and also one correction, the representative for, sorry. Yes, the representative for the International Union of History and Philosophy of Science and Technology, IUHPST, DHST, is not Catherine Jamais because she's left, it is Benedict Löwe. So that's just one correction. All right, so we have 6 initial speakers who were asked to prepare some remarks, and then the floor, or at least this floor, will be open to the remaining, I haven't counted, but possibly 14, up to 14 other representatives of the remaining academic organizations who also want to give their responses to these questions. We have 2 hours, and if we have time, and I hope we do, it would be good to have some questions or comments from the wider floor to the speakers. So I hope that sounds like a good plan. So I'd like to invite, first of all, Ulvind Andersen, who represents the UAI, the International Academic Union. And if, as you come up, if you wouldn't mind perhaps clarifying exactly what your role is, because I'm not always clear on the specifics, okay? So thank you, Ulvind.
Thank you. Thank you for being invited to speak and even to be the first speaker. My name is Ulvind Andersen. I'm at present the president of the Union Académique Internationale. By profession, I'm a professor of classics, and I'm from Norway. Excuse me. Let me start by reminding you that the Union Académique Internationale, and you can see the basic facts in the printed profile, it is not itself a disciplinary organization. It consists of academies, institutions that are themselves multidisciplinary, many of them even comprising natural sciences. That academies, for better or worse, I should say, tend to maintain a distinct academic tradition and culture, although they are of very different size and strength. And that the Union Académique was created in order to facilitate research projects of a scope and on a scale so as to call for international cooperation, and that actual projects still are of the essence of the Union Académique, not policymaking or lobbying or conferences and events. And we do not have a journal. So to turn to the 3 main questions we have been asked to address. First, to what extent does the Union Académique contribute to the themes of this conference? Well, the last theme of the conference, the meta-discussion about humanities in a changing world, has not been taken up in any of our projects, although it is a constant concern, as you can think, certainly for an organization with such long and strong traditions. To the other 5, we have contributed by way of our projects, which fall into 6 categories, as you can see in the handouts. We have contributed least, perhaps, to humanity and environment. Again, not surprising for an almost 100 years old organization. We come from the past, but we live in the present. However, in all likelihood, some aspects of what was discussed in the conference session on adaptation, sustainability, and climate change on Monday and Tuesday will develop into a Union Académique project. And we do have a project on cities and urbanization in the Mediterranean area, led by our Catalan Academy member. Most projects will fit under the heritage theme, such as the 3 projects presented at the Union Académique session earlier today: the corpus of Greek pottery, the corpus of medieval stained glass, and the commentaries on Aristotle and their Hebrew and Arab and Latin traditions, receptions. And some projects, like the last one mentioned, and the project on sources for African history, which is involved in a session tomorrow, bear as well on the theme of cultural identities. More recent projects tend to have a comparative or intercultural component, such as China and the Mediterranean world, which started up in 2005. The Union Académique has also initiated a series of smaller intercultural conferences, especially on relations between the Western and Arab and Muslim world. And we do those conferences in cooperation with other institutions, both in Europe and in the Middle East. 3 such symposia have been organized, and a 4th one is in preparation. The last one was in Amman, Jordan. The next one is in Alexandria. So, that's roughly what it is about, and maybe you need to read through the text to get some more background. What kind of challenges does the Union Académique currently face? Well, funding, of course. As an organization, we live mainly off membership fees, which make it just possible to maintain a minimum secretariat and give small grants to some projects. But of course, many of the projects have local and external support, and there is a certain income from publications in some series. It cannot be denied that in most countries, academies are no longer the most important institutions for funding and performing research. As for gender issues, which was also specified, our General Assembly consists of delegates appointed by the member academies and institutions and reflects their traditional male bias. I'm afraid I have to admit that. About 10% of delegates are women. For the time being, only 1 out of 9 elected board members is a woman. During its 98 years of existence, there has been only 1 woman president, Madeleine Caviness. Things need to change, and we are pushing. As for regional balance, when it comes to membership, the Union Académique is a truly worldwide organization. The Japan Academy was a founding member back in 1919. Among the non-European members are South Korea, Thailand, India, and Vietnam, Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay. The 3 countries most recently admitted were Mongolia, the Ivory Coast, and also the Royal Society of New Zealand. At our upcoming General Assembly in Tokyo in October of this year, Senegal and Kosovo will become full members, and the Ethiopian Academy and an academic institution in Peru will become affiliate members. But it is a big challenge to us that many of our new members from outside the Western cultural and academic sphere are not very stable and strong institutions, and not always become very active members and contribute to our projects. So that's more a question of co-opting them to this kind of academic world and work. As for the projects themselves, a good number of projects deal with non-Western culture or cultural interaction. For instance, the corpus of Iranian inscriptions, the Encyclopedia Iranica, Hobgogorin, the Encyclopedic Dictionary of Buddhism on the basis of Chinese and Japanese sources, Philologica Koranica, and the Annals of the Joseon Dynasty in Korea. Now, as you understand, Union Academique is very historically minded. 3 sections are named history of something. 1 is dedicated to the Greco-Roman world. We are great on dead languages and cultures long gone. Heritage. I would count as a challenge to the Union Academique to establish more projects that deal with the modern world, even the contemporary world. One project that has materialized recently is on modern Englishes under the leadership of the Australian Academy of Humanities, and Professor Pam Peters will present it in a session later today. Another challenge is to integrate social science perspectives. The Union Academique is a member not only of CIPS, but of ISSC as well. Some years ago, there were a series of workshops in Catalonia, Tunisia, Sweden, and Israel on the topic of human dignity. It gave birth to a big and handsome handbook of human dignity published by Cambridge University Press, but the initiative did not develop into an ongoing project. It is hoped that the topic will be taken up again by the Royal Academy of Jurisprudence in Madrid. There are external challenges as well. The overriding concern is that it has become increasingly difficult to get understanding and to raise money for basic long-term research in the humanities and for the collecting and processing of source material. We are supposed to do things that are more immediately relevant to the challenges of modern society and that will yield more instant gratification. With impact as the buzzword for research, even in the humanities, the kind of scholarship that the Union Academique represents is at risk. So what do we expect from CIPS? There is a special relationship between Union Academique and CIPS. Not only that we were the main founding members and still have a majority of votes, relatively. In the wake of the tragedy of the First World War, there arose in many quarters a strong desire for international cooperation also within the academic community. The idea that cooperation among scholars would foster understanding and détente undoubtedly played a role when Union Academique was launched. Indeed, it was seen by some as a parallel within the academic field to the League of Nations. Now, the Union Academique never became anything like that, but CIPS, with its high-flying foundational statement and because of its links to UNESCO, represents somehow the higher ideals that were there in the beginning and still should be part of what drives and motivates us. So the Union Academique wants CIPS to be a global voice for the humanities, and that CIPS, while striving to be relevant and to deliver to current challenges, continues to stand up for the kind of basic research in the humanities that the Union Academique represents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Andersen. I'd now like to invite Laurent Tissot, who represents the member organization, the International Committee of the Historical Sciences, SISH.
Thank you very much, Rosalind. I think history is everywhere. So I will not stress on the first question because have I heard? Well, I heard the word history, so I think history is present. So I will stress to the second question, the challenges. But before that, I am a historian and I have to do history to present what is SICH. And it is not a coincidence if SICH was created in Geneva in 1926. And what has been called the spirit of Geneva, l'esprit de Genève, left a mark on the congresses which were organized from 1928 until now. And considering the circumstances which brought about the creation of an organization aiming at an international gathering of all historians should make us understand that the idealism which motivated them at a time when everything was to be reconstructed. Idealism was indeed at the core of the discussion, not only to explain why SICH emerged in the interwar period, but also why it succeeded to survive up to now. And if in 1949 the SICH joined the SIPCH, it was the same feeling which operated to contribute, making discussions, collaboration, working together possible, not only for the sake of history, but also for the sake of the entire society. Historians were again convinced that idealism, despite of the Second World War, had to be considered as the main impulse on how to construct a peaceful world. One can't deny that idealism plays a role and is a serious way to be heard. One can associate it to naivety, to a kind of blindness, or worse, to the negation of reality. And many historians have written books to demonstrate that. But what we cannot deny is the fact that 70 years later, after its creation, the SICH is still lively and still contributing with its own means and capacities to render scientific cooperation possible and to show that humanities have something to say in this very difficult world. So the challenges. I will just mention here what I see as the main challenges, and there are three of them. The first challenge deals with what considered as a fragmentation of history. It is a fact, and possibly a confession, that for a long time, historians believed that their discipline was the king or the queen of humanities. Fortunately, this is no more the case. They had to give up this feeling despite, a process which is maybe not entirely achieved for some colleagues. That is not to say that history, considered as a scientific domain, is now just reduced to serving filmmakers or inspiring novel writers. But it suffers from this fragmentation. And the French historian Pierre Nora had already noticed at the end of the 70s that this phenomenon tended to weaken the discipline. Is there a common aim, a common methodology, a common concern amongst historians when we know that era of expertise are now so numerous that a dialogue becomes inaudible, even impossible? The possibility of adhering to the SICH, not only on a national basis, but also on a thematic basis, international relations, social history, economic history, was its response to the need to accept historical associations interested in specific domains. No more than 30 associations are members of the CICH on this basis, and no doubt they are a source of richness and of diversity. But at the same time, it is difficult to find a common ground between associations which inevitably don't share the same concern. And the congresses, as the next Congress will take place in Poznan, in Poland, in 2020, organized every 5 years, are supposed to be the place for discussion, debates, or for sharing global historical issues. And in this sense, the two first days of the Congress are dedicated to session, discussion, global concern. The second challenge deals with the visibility of the CICH in the world. The fragmentation we have just mentioned doesn't make necessary anymore to adhere to a global association. A lot of associations consider that they are self-sufficient. They organize their own congress every 2 or 3 years. They publish their own review with their own financial resources, and so on. There is no need to be part of a HEAD association, which Congress is organized every 5 years and include more than 70 associations at the same time and not directly connected with one's own interest. It's a real problem, and CICH must be convinced the community of historians that its goal exceeds the defense and of a specific organization. Another challenge is linked how to attract organizations coming from countries in Africa, in South America, in Asia, in which the historical research and the teaching of history are rare for different reasons: lack of human and financial resources, political and ideological pressures. And the CICH has been trying for some years to deal with these problems. And the third challenge is closely connected to the previous one: how to articulate freedom of speech and true thinking. Scientific work requires conditions to be methodologically, conceptually, epistemologically, ethically appropriate. To be considered as an historian doesn't imply that you are entitled to do research anyhow and to say anything on the pretext that you are protected by the freedom of speech. Maybe more than any other scientific domain, history is exposed to this danger. It is used to defend non-defendable position or interpretation. It gives a platform to anybody who claims to be historian and feel the need to expose assertion on the basis of what he thinks is the right thing to say. In history, we have many examples which unfortunately tell story for history. The history of the Holocaust, for example, in the form of revisionism, is an example of this pseudo-history. But surprisingly and suddenly, this case is emerging again. The fake news society seems to give the feeling that what is said today will be totally different tomorrow, and that was considered as a truth today will be not the case tomorrow. It seems that the past doesn't exist anymore. Truth is not a flexible word, changing its meaning simply because the actor, be a politician or a journalist, consider it to so. These are challenges that CICH must confront. One, freedom of speech is not inevitably concealed with truth thinking. And second, truth is not an immortal, but it must be proved that new facts, new events can reconfigure what was considered as truth at a certain time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laurent. I'd like to invite Professor Tim Jensen, President of the IHR, International Association for the History of Religions.
Thank you for the invitation to once again have an opportunity to address all of you. Now, as you can see from page 7, then the IHR today, 2017, is what we boast to call sort of a truly global organization for the critical, analytical, cross-cultural, historical, comparative study of religion. Now, this was not always the case, of course. In 1950, at the 7th Congress in Amsterdam, I think the Gamelan Orchestra from somewhere else around the world was the only non-European participant. But this has changed radically over the years due to a strategic globalization move of the IHR leadership, and we continue to do so. Actually, as you can see, since we had the 7th International Congress in 1950, we started a little earlier as a purely Congress organization. That was in 1900 with a Congress in Paris. Now, of course, this globalization process is not without its problems and challenges. The religionswissenschaftliche study of religion could be said to start and be possible to start all over the world, given the right circumstances. But institutionally speaking, it started within sort of the white western part of Europe. And this is where for more than a century we have had institutions in place at the universities for a disciplined, organized study of religions with its own Forschungsgeschichte, etc., etc. Now, when we move around the world, there are not such institutions in place. We could support the coming into being of it, but we also have to support the specific sort of culturally influenced way that our colleagues start out their study of religious projects. It's not easy, and we, as well as many others, I think, have to be aware of the dangers of cross-disciplinary studies. I think that my predecessor as Secretary General, I served as Secretary General for 10 years, and now I'm the President, Armin Gertz, rightly said 10, 15 years ago that the IHR was in an identity crisis, but that it was a positive thing. I think we still are in that identity crisis, and I think we have to be very careful also in terms of what Rosalind Hackett mentioned to me the other day, not to just embrace any kind of cross-disciplinary endeavor. Just like we don't want to embrace any kind of merger at the university level. It's become very popular to sort of merge the study of religions department into something bigger. It could be something good, history, but it could also be philosophy. And normally we've had nothing to do with normative philosophy. We are not into the normative business, but we could do with some other philosophers. But it's a danger, and we have to be aware that as an international organization, we support our colleagues when they are trying to fight these mergers that are endangering our discipline. Still, I want to say that even if we have some kind of identity crisis, there is still some kind of corporate identity. I have tried in several articles to express what it consists of. But it is something about what in German is called Religionswissenschaft in its strict sense. We do want to study what is called religion as a human, social, cultural, historical phenomenon with all the theories and methods available to such studies. That also means that we stress that we are a non-confessional, non-apologetical, etc., organization. We study religion as a human phenomenon. That's it. We disregard the truth claims, so to speak, of the religions when we move along. Now, something I would like to also stress here is that if I'm asked to say something about how we relate to some of the themes, I just cannot. And I certainly cannot in the same way as my colleague Øyvind Andersen could do it. The IHR don't have specific projects, so to speak. We don't publish series of books on a specific project, say environmental issues, gender, etc. We have our flagship journal, Newman. It's published by Brill, and it was started in 1954 or 5. We just published an anniversary volume that I highly recommend to those who are interested in the history of the study of religions, and in our association and in Newman. We also publish a book series, an IHR book series with Equinox. And of course you can take a look at that and see what kind of studies are being carried on by individual members around the world. But apart from that, if you want to see what we do, you have to look at the Congress publications, the proceedings, but also the specific Congress publications where you can see the themes dealt with during each and every quinquennial Congress. But we also publish sometimes the proceedings from the regional and special conferences that we support, several each and every year, in Europe and outside of Europe. In that way, of course, you can see that if you move to, for instance, Leuven in a month from now, where we have the European Association for the Study of Religions regional conference, you will see that we have lots of sessions, no doubt, about religion and environment, or religion and migration, or religion and borders, etc., etc. But we don't sort of have a project on something like that as an organization. Now, if I should wind up saying just a few words on how I would, just in line with what I said about the borders the other day, I would sort of look at, borders and migration, the one theme. The other theme I would look at was environment, and the third one would be cultural heritage. Because it's so easy for a scholar of religion to relate to these themes, even if we don't do it always explicitly and like that. I already said something about borders, and today I just want to stress how scholars linked to the study of religion, be they anthropologists or sociologists or scholars educated within an institution labeled study of religions, they have dealt with something bordering to borders for a long time. Everything that has to do with classification and categorization. And this is key in the study of religion, of course. This is what it's all about. And I think that they have done some fascinating stuff, going back to all the people of the French school and up to today, and Victor Turner too. And I think that what I like to stress is the fascination with borders. It's the creativity of the sort of chaotic in-between, the betwixt and between, linked to the notion of the borders. It's the attraction of young, newly wedded Russians going to this stupid borderline between Asia and Europe that I showed on a PowerPoint the other day. Why are they doing that? Why is it so fascinating with these things? What is it with the body and its sort of openings that makes it such a vehicle for symbolism? Why is it so fascinating with this transgression of borders, the whole interplay between what we call chaos and cosmos? So that's one thing. The other thing I stressed the other day, and then we come to sort of what I would call the applied study of religions also. That is, of course, how can we as scholars contribute to a qualified discussion about some of the challenges facing the world today, for instance, in regard to refugees, immigrants, the crossing of borders, nationalist, neo-nationalist identity politics, etc. We have to do research and research and research, and we quite often have to kill quite a few stereotypes and quite a few myths and quite a few lies. Not that it's sort of our agenda to go and save the world, but if we do our work in a proper way, it can be used by politicians and others. We do not go into interreligious dialogue, but we can study interreligious dialogue, and we can provide people with material to enter into it in a proper way. When it comes to environment, I myself started studies in notions about nature, whatever that may have meant to people 2,000 years ago, some 20 years ago in Denmark. Because I found it fascinating to see how representatives of various so-called world religions gathered in Assisi in Italy to contribute to the saving of the world by way of looking into their 2,000-old texts to find out what Buddha or somebody else had to say about nature and the environment. Of course, Buddha had nothing to say about it. But they retrieved things, also Christians and also Muslims. Yes. And we could, in that way, look into the sort of, what do you call it, the place where religions are constantly created and recreated. So we could look into the dynamics of religions, how they renew themselves, how they relate to challenges of the world. So we could look at the dynamics and changes and innovations. Of course, we could also provide material that could be of interest to people looking at environmental issues today. The same goes for cultural heritage, and this is my final work. Religion is always culture. Culture is not always religion. But what we witness today is in many countries, governments, politicians, trying to cheat people into thinking that cultural heritage in our country is always only something that is good. And when it's linked to our traditional majority religion, then it's good. Then we want to take care of it. So we can also sort of look at all the discourses on religion and cultural heritage and provide food for thought for discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. I'd like to invite Margaret Igonet, President of FILM, International Federation for Modern Languages and Literatures, to the microphone.
Thank you. As representative from FILM, thank you so much, Rosalind. I want to start by thanking the organizers for bringing this wide array of scholars together for interdisciplinary reflection on our mission and our potential strategies for addressing present challenges to the humanities. The two most obvious challenges that I think we face now are the disappearance of funding in the humanities and the corollary of that disappearance, namely the diminishing role of the humanities in the public arena. A gathering together of many voices, such as this Congress in Liège, offers a response that may allow us to deal with both of these challenges in some fashion. First, the World Humanities Congress provides an important platform for debate, for exchange of ideas about innovative work, and for proposals to pursue social action that can help us to support the humanities, including funding. Co-organizing conferences or symposia can amplify our voices, carried forward in selected publications of papers. We can further this goal by specifically scheduling conferences together to intensify interdisciplinary reflection and also to diminish the scheduling conflicts that increasingly emerge with the proliferation of more specialized associations mentioned just before. A federation like FILM, or CIPSH, achieves its intellectual goals most successfully through such collaborative exchanges. To some extent, such co-organization can also help us to manage the competition over increasingly limited funds. Just as a Congress can bring together scholars and public intellectuals for the kind of embodied dialogue that sparks fresh thinking, so too do our journals offer a meeting place for dialogue among voices from different nations and different disciplinary methodologies. To support the humanities, we must support our interdisciplinary journals, such as Diogenes, edited by Luca Scarantino, here today. Another such journal was FILM's early journal, Helicon, which published multilingual issues for a few years in the 1930s and 40s, some of the darkest years of the 20th century. Today, FILM pursues similar goals through Film Studies, a publication series at Benjamin's that addresses a general public with professional issues, but avoiding academic jargon, which I consider to be one of the issues in the diminished respect for the humanities, the elitist impact of academic argot. Scholarly journals tend to preach to the converted, although the increasing availability of our scholarship on the web is a strategy we can pursue to reach a broader audience. We must also build a new foundation for academic values and respect for the daily impact of the humanities through the defense of our cultures and heritages in a broader social context, and especially in the domain of pedagogy. As a federation of associations, many of which focus on languages as well as on literary heritage, we at Film are particularly eager that SIPSH should help us defend a multiplicity of cultural identities and diversity through the support for the teaching of languages to resist the English language monoculture. At our recent meeting in Film, for example, some of the most interesting discussions addressed the rich array of Indian national and regional languages, as well as the deep history of languages, such as a 60,000-year-old tongue preserved on an island. These are not just linguistic issues, rather, they spilled out into discussions of self-translation as a creative adaptation, as well as the generation of hybrid forms and the political vulnerability of cultural traditions. Furthermore, the integration at Delhi of dance performance with the oral narrative of Sitarama and of sculpture with mythic representations drove home the fact that our cultural heritage depends on relations among the arts and their different modes of narrative. The importance of these values is embraced by our various film organizations. To take an example from the MLA, the Modern Language Association, the defense of language instruction has meant protesting against the dismantling of language departments at educational institutions. In a world climate of growing intolerance, exemplified by the renewed America First ideology in the USA presidency, and in a world of nationalist hostility to migration elsewhere, as well as in the United States, the defense of intercultural relations is critically important. As the president of SIPSH has noted, we must preserve the different cultural identities that are enshrined in literatures and languages. Film's membership takes a special interest in access to mother tongues and in the protection of indigenous languages in the schools. An example would be the much violated Treaty of Native Americans giving them a right to be educated in their own languages. Another example where the rights have been preserved, if only in part, would be Uganda, where the national languages are used in the schools. In this regard, the MLA has taken positive action by creating a digital map of languages in the USA, making visible their disappearances and their new arrivals. Such maps could be created around the world. Moreover, as a tactic to defend language diversity and literary study broadly, the MLA has launched a pedagogic program to link university instruction and research with pedagogy in the schools and high schools. A crossover among our audiences must provide a new foundation for intellectual thought and respect for the daily impact of the humanities. Such outreach, undertaken also in schools by other organizations like the American Folklore Society, or in a Danish project anchored at Aarhus, will foster support for the humanities from the ground up. Broadening our audiences will be central to the preservation of our cultural heritage and the strengthening of intercultural relations on which world peace rests. And like some of the other organizations here, I just note that Film was founded in the post-World War I period. To close, I point briefly to a digital feature in which we collaborate by sharing information among organizations through postings on our individual websites, podcasts, MOOCs, or digital meetings that enhance academic networks and collaborative publications. Europeans increasingly offer a model for open source, non-profit scholarly publications and for the creation of digital databases such as Europeana, the Gutenberg Archive, or AOL, the Ancient World Online. These tools give access to those scholars around the world whose libraries cannot subscribe to journals or buy many books. We should fund digitized archives to preserve institutional memories and change the ways we understand history, as the project on the history of Africa is attempting to do. Although access to the web itself is uneven, it can increasingly promote geographically egalitarian exchanges. As the web has become a particularly powerful tool, it can become a tool to promote communication between the old and the young, scholars and non-scholars, between the elites of specialist associations and the generalist perspective of a broad public. I suggest optimistically, although I'm not an optimist, that we stand on the threshold of new possibilities in the humanities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Our next speaker is Luca Maria Scarantino, who represents the International Federation of Societies of Philosophy.
Thank you, Rosalind. Thank you, dear colleagues. My name is Luca Maria Scarantino. I'm the Secretary General of FISP, the International Federation of Philosophical Societies, another founding member of CIPSH in 1949. I'd like to let you know that another member, prominent member of the board of FISP is here, is Professor Bill McBride, who's the past president of FISP and who's also another historic memory of our organization. FISP is, briefly, the largest organization in philosophy in the world, and more fundamentally probably is the most comprehensive in terms of geographic and cultural diversity. FISP gathers today 141 societies. We don't have individuals, we have member societies, 103 national societies in 67 countries all across the world, and 38 international societies that virtually cover every country on Earth. So it's a very large membership, very diverse, and it's steadily increasing and becoming increasingly diverse. To try to answer to the three, or to address the three questions that Professor Fujiwara submitted to our attention, how could FISP contribute to the themes of this Humanity Forum? I'm very much tempted of borrowing Laurent Tissot's words and say philosophy is everywhere, so no need to answer the question. But I would say that FISP uses three essential ways of work, and this might be the ways how we could contribute. First of all, it's a global scholarly network. And the goal of, one of the main goals of FISP is scholarly networking. Scholarly networking in itself might not be seen as a goal, as an end, but I still believe that in a world where there is still a very clear dominant group of region or culture in academia, networking also means bringing people from different countries, different cultures, different regions into a common scholarly network. And this is something that is an end in itself for us. Networking means, therefore, for us, increasing and promoting diversity. Cultural diversity, for sure, in bringing people from different regions, bringing them into conferences that major university may not conceive as intercultural or cross-cultural, and we do conceive as cross-cultural, so there is a complementarity. Gender diversity, very much so. We are extremely strongly committed to promote gender diversity within FISP and through FISP in the activities, conferences, and congresses that we realize. 2 years ago, we have created an ad hoc committee, an international committee on gender, chaired by Professor Sigridur Thorgeirsdottir from Iceland, who is in charge of trying to coordinate as many organizations and scholars working on gender as possible across the world. Now, all these activities find their main focus, their main event, in the periodical World Congresses of Philosophy that FISP organizes every 5 years. Next year, 2018, we will hold the 24th World Congress of Philosophy in Beijing, China, hosted by Peking University. It's the 24th of a series that started in 1900. A World Congress of Philosophy is a place where basically thousands of scholars come to exchange, to discuss current trends of philosophy, to discuss their different classics, to discuss ongoing transformation in contemporary societies, and to establish personal and academic and scholarly connections. A World Congress gathers an average number of 3,000 to 4,000 scholars from all over the world. And I would like to extend an invitation to all of you to attend the World Congress, to submit proposals for panels. I will be more than happy to give you all the room we can to make the World Congress in Beijing as not only intercultural, but also multidisciplinary as possible. So if any of you is wishing to attend the Congress, if any of you would be interested in submitting a proposal for the Congress, please write to me and I will be more than happy to open the space to all of our colleagues. This is addressed to individuals as well as to universities or institutions. Now, what are the challenges we are facing? I don't see much interest in describing the challenges within FISP, but the challenges of an international organization of philosophy are major ones. The first one is probably the defense of philosophy, wherever it's threatened by academic restrictions. Someone was mentioning the progressive closing of departments, not only in the humanities, but in philosophy across the world, threats to freedom of speech, political pressures into academia and on scholars. We try to intervene and to provide international support to these threats, to threaten people as often as possible. In the last 10 years, I think Professor McBride, Professor Moran, and myself have written dozens and dozens of letters of support to universities, academies, scholars who are under such threats. Do they work? Are they effective? Often they are not. In most cases, they are not. But sometimes they are. And this is something that may change things. I can remember the international campaign we did in 2009 in support of the Institute of Philosophy of the Academy of Science in Russia, or the international campaign in support of the maintain of philosophy into the high school curricula in Mexico and in other Latin American countries in the last years. This is an activity that FISP does permanently. We have created we have enhanced our committee on teaching of philosophy, now chaired by Professor Vargas from Mexico, exactly to try to enhance and to defend the place of philosophy, not in academia in this case, but mainly in high schools. An important activity that FISP supports is the International Philosophy Olympiads that take place every year. They gather high school students from nowadays, I think, 50 countries in the world. The students come, they write an essay, and there is a jury that decides which are the best essays. But it's not as much about competition as about bringing students from all over the world together and have them establish personal ties, personal links based on their interest in philosophy. It is also an interesting point of view to see how philosophical education is changing its geography. In the last years, for instance, we've seen a growing presence and successfulness of students from Asian countries. And it's something that shows a trend that we're not always aware in our universities. We say challenges, we say defense of philosophy. It's also about defending and increasing intercultural conceptions of, cross-cultural conceptions of philosophy. It's not by chance that the next World Congress will take place in China. Cross-cultural conception of philosophy may also mean expanding the boundaries of what we call philosophy. We don't really have a crisis of identity, I have to say, but there is a growing awareness that the classic conception of philosophy, as we have known in the West, for instance, may not be entirely appropriate or fit to include other philosophical traditions that nowadays are widely recognized as a great contribution to the history of thought, starting by the Chinese one, for instance. So a rethinking, a reconsidering of the boundaries, a redefinition of what is philosophy is something that is part of the ongoing debate and is something that FISP is strongly trying to bring to the fore of international philosophical debate. Now, last point, what do we expect from CIPSH? I don't think we may mention specific expectations, but there are certainly general expectations, which for a philosopher may be even more important than specific ones. Certainly, someone said to be a voice in defense of the humanities across the world. This is certainly something that we expect CIPSH to do, to defend the place of the humanities in as many different ways as possible. But it's not just the humanities generically. We hope that CIPSH would do it in a cross-cultural way, defend the humanities not just as a particular kind of humanity, but also as a scholarly and cultural way of promoting interculturality in our lives. We are very much trying to blend the heritage, to merge different cultures. Humanities may help in that, and we hope that CIPSH might, to some extent, adopt such kind of approach. And the other point would be probably to defend them in a kind of cross-disciplinary way, trying not to destroy the boundaries between disciplines, but try to see how different topics that belong to our life, to our cultural life, may only be dealt with if addressed from different points of view. The point of migrations has been raised several times. Well, I can't forget that I come from a country, Italy, that is in the front line of this contemporary tragedy, and we see how it is not possible to deal with not with the problem of migration, but with the ongoing discourses on migration that are growing in Europe, discourses of racism, xenophobia, exclusion, discriminations, unless we use different scholarly approaches. Philosophy can help. Religious studies can help. Language studies can help. All these things need to go together, and CIPSH is probably an organization that might be extremely useful in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, from this stage of the program, I'd like to invite Professor Chandana Mathur, who represents the World Anthropological Union.
So I'd like to begin by thanking, can you hear me okay now? I'd like to begin by thanking you all for this opportunity. I'm Chandana Mathur. I'm the co-chair with Professor Faye Harrison of the Steering Committee of the World Anthropological Union, a newly formed organization that consists of two chambers, the International Union of Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences, the IUAES, and the World Council of Anthropological Associations, WCAA, of which I am the current chair. And Faye is the president of IUAES. The WAU was created in September last year when the members of both IUAES and WCAA voted overwhelmingly in favor of formalized collaboration between the two organizations and chose to form a new bicameral organization with separate IUAES and WCAA chambers in order to preserve the distinctive character and histories of the two organizations. So the WAU, which I'm representing here today, will formally begin to function as such next month when the Constitution and operational guidelines will go into effect. Because our liminal status has been confusing even to the CIPS organizers, I'd like to take a few moments to tell you a little bit about the two organizations that have come together to form the WAU, and now it's two chambers. So the IUAES was formally established in 1948, though its first World Congress took place in 1934 in London, and it's been a member of CIPS since 1949. IUAES has a membership primarily of individual scholars working in the fields of anthropology and ethnology, but it also includes archaeologists, linguists, biological and medical anthropologists, among others. Its aim is to enhance exchange and communication among scholars across world regions in a collective effort to expand human knowledge, advance our understanding of human societies, and contribute to a sustainable future. To foster discussion and dissemination of research globally, the IUAES holds periodic world congresses, and more frequently, in between the world congresses, inter-congresses, symposia, and seminars. Through its scientific commissions, which span numerous subfields of anthropology and ethnology, the IUAES stimulates the convergence of research interests among anthropologists and the dissemination of research findings through publications. These scientific commissions of the IUAES are actually the intellectual core of the organization, and the 6 themes of the World Humanities Conference, which we've been asked to address, actually flow through these, they form the basis for the organization for many of these scientific commissions. Some of these scientific commissions are old and large international organizations in their own right. I suppose the IUAES Commission on Legal Pluralism comes to mind as an example of one of the larger scale commissions. The WCAA, the World Council of Anthropological Associations, of which I am the chair, is a network of anthropological associations and does not have individual scholars as members. It grew out of the World Anthropologies movement, which was an intellectual challenge to the long-standing dominance of Anglo-American anthropology and the marginalization of anthropological traditions from elsewhere. Founded in 2004, the WCAA now consists of 53 national, regional, and international associations from all continents. And it may sound paradoxical to say this about an organization represented by 50-odd chairs and presidents of associations from around the world, but the WCAA is a deeply subversive project. It disrupts business as usual in because it is a forum where representatives from dominant and marginal world regions and dominant and marginal anthropological traditions meet on an equal footing. An example of this philosophy is the WCAA journal Deja Lu, which I'm sure most of you know means already read, which republishes key articles selected and sent in by the editors of anthropological journals worldwide. And it's sort of a greatest hits journal, which appears every year. It provides expanded readership for work that might otherwise have gone unnoticed internationally. With their complementary structures and history, the coming together of the IUAS and the WCA will amplify the many voices of anthropology, which we hope to fruitfully contribute to CIPS. I was asked to speak about the major difficulties and challenges that the World Anthropological Union is currently facing. So I first want to make mention of the challenges that affect the very conditions of possibility of anthropological research. Challenges deriving on the one hand from authoritarian regimes and intolerant non-state actors, as well as on the other hand, threats from profit maximization models and what Marilyn Strathern calls audit cultures in the realms of education. Regarding the first, the IUAS and the WCA are together deliberating on these issues in a project entitled Anthropological Fieldwork and Risk in a Violent World. We began this series of conversations soon after the Cambridge doctoral student Giulio Regeni was tortured and killed while researching independent labor movements in Cairo in February last year. While this is a key concern for fieldwork-based disciplines like anthropology, this is also an issue that reverberates across the humanities. For example, at the very moment, Siyu Wang, a doctoral candidate in Princeton University's history department, is being held in Tehran's infamous Evin prison. So if it's not out of place to mention this, I would urge you to visit the homepage of the American Historical Association. It's at historians.org. In the area under news, it contains I'm going backwards. It contains, my goodness, this one. It contains a statement on his behalf by two historians, one from Princeton, one from Rutgers. And you might consider signing it and circulating it to fellow academics. They're looking for support at the moment from academics and scholarly societies, not from human rights organizations. But to return to the general point, the WAU and other CIPS organizations might wish to together explore further the question of the difficulties involved in critical research in an increasingly dangerous and polarized world. The other major threat coming from the spread of audit cultures and the shutdown of departments, which has already been alluded to, is a common problem for all humanities disciplines. And it would be useful to think through these issues together in the CIPS context. Finally, I want to bring up the issue of the merger between the ISSP and ICSU that has already surfaced in the General Assembly discussions on Sunday. It affects the WAU enormously since we are members of both the ISSC and the ICSU, thanks to the crossroads nature of anthropology as a discipline. And we are watching this process very closely. One WAU steering committee member, Professor Thomas Reuter, is currently on the ISSC executive. And another one, Professor Junji Koizumi, is involved in the transition team. At the most recent IUAES Intercongress in Ottawa in May this year, we all, the two executives of WCA and IUAES, we met Professor Gordon McBean, the current president of ICSU. So he's a climate scientist with joint appointments in the departments of physics and geography and political science in his home institution. And the idea of a merger seems less calamitous for the social sciences, of course, when someone like him talks about it. However, our questions to him were focused, understandably, on the long-term safeguards for the social sciences within a potentially merged organization. And even as we wonder about how this will turn out, it is worth considering the issue that in the current conjuncture, when there's a retreat from evidence-based science, even in the most powerful nation in the global north, this has already been alluded to by our colleague from SISH, it may actually be rather important for the sciences and the social sciences to pull together. And of course, SIPS has to be part of this process and part of this discussion, and as has an important role as an observer to this process. So in terms of what we might expect from SIPS, I really couldn't think of how to put this, because I imagine that this is a common platform that we are together in the process of devising and reworking on a day-to-day basis. So I think the rest of the discussion should hopefully bring that out. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chandana. Now, we have one mic, but many people. And the remaining organizations, their representatives, now have an opportunity to address you. Obviously, they know that they cannot go through the information on their organizations and answer all the questions. So I remind you, please, that it is in your interest and in our interest in ending in a timely fashion to just introduce yourselves and then perhaps emphasize one particular contribution or one particular challenge or one particular request of SIPS. And I reserve the right, even though I'm relinquishing this material object, that if somebody talks too long, I will stand up and make it known that it's time to pass the microphone on in a democratic fashion. So let's hope this works. So I'm going to begin at this end.
Well, thank you very much. I am Benedikt Löwe. I represent the Division for Logic, Methodology and Philosophy of Science and Technology of the International Union for History and Philosophy of Science and Technology. I already used up all of my time. This is a 12-letter acronym. We are okay. Let me focus on the one message I want to deliver. So we were founded. The International Union for History and Philosophy of Science and Technology has a similar history to the WAU, in the sense that it was created out of two different institutions, but 60 years ago, and the two institutions are still very alive and active. The two divisions. The two divisions are the independent bodies. And the union was created in order to become a member of ICSU, because we wanted to be the meta-discipline in ICSU, the one that talks about how we do science rather than do science. And in that respect, we are actually quite pleased with the fact that the collaboration between the natural sciences and the social sciences is becoming stronger by the merger. Of course, we are also worried about certain things, but I see inside ICSU no real reason for concern, because I was on the strategic working group of the merger, and I have seen no sign that there is a lack of respect for the social sciences. On the contrary, there is a very holistic attitude. For example, ICSU was discussing the problem of the word science in English, which refers to the natural sciences, saying that in other languages, Wissenschaft or Wetenschap is a term that incorporates social sciences and humanities. And in the strategic documents, there is a footnote that, if you read it closely, interprets science as a holistic endeavor where everything is part of this. And that is something that we have been striving for years, representing the humanistic and social science aspect within science. Within SIPS, of course, we now have to take the other direction, right? So we have to say, look, it's not just the fight against the evil scientists who are taking all of your money, but we have to build bridges and talk to each other. And that is our mission.
Hi, my name is James Powelski. I'm the Executive Director of the International Positive Psychology Association. I'm at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. I represent part of the new growth of CIPSH as one of 4 organizations that have just been accepted into CIPSH in the General Assembly on Sunday. I'm a philosopher by training. I was attracted to positive psychology because it asked so many of the fundamental questions in the humanities about how we should live our lives, what is the good life, what is flourishing, and brought a complementary set of methodologies for exploring these questions. Positive psychology reminds us that in trying to improve our lives, it's important to look to the amelioration of problems. It's also important to look to the realization of opportunities, not just to look to weaknesses and how to change those, but also to strengths and how to realize and encourage those. I am the principal investigator of a project on the humanities and human flourishing, which will involve complementary methods from the humanities and the social sciences. So we will be, as a part of this project, we will be convening groups of scholars across 8 different humanities disciplines to ask questions specifically about what that discipline contributes to human well-being. Oftentimes, I think we get so focused on where we're going to publish that article that we're writing that we forget the big picture. So this is a call to that big picture. And then collaboratively, we will also work with social scientists to try to find ways of assessing, to see how well we're doing in realizing the possibilities of the humanities. This will help both us know how to do what we're doing well and how to do things better, and we expect it will also help us to be able to make presentations and arguments that are data-rich to policymakers to help drive forward the goals of the humanities that we all share.
My name is Gilvan Miller de Oliveira. I'm a linguist by training and represent the Maya Network for Linguistic Diversity that is in the CIPSH for 3 days. We entered on Sunday, and I would like to thank the CIPSH for this hospitality. Maya was created in 2005 as an initiative of our president Adama Samaseko in Africa, with a group of entities present in the Summit of the Information Society in Tunis 2005, and has today 101 members from 34 countries in 4 continents. One of our main works that is a consequence of the birth ambience from Maya is the collective book NetLong Towards the Multilingual Cyberspace that bring interesting approach on how multilingualism and how languages are present in the internet. Our main goal is to encourage civil society, the private sector, research institutions and NGOs, as well governments and institutions, to adopt and implement measures enhancing equitable multilingualism. Of course, the strategies to be used for that are a main challenge. I would like to remember that one of our proposals is the organization of a UNESCO World Conference on Multilingualism that could bring a strong agenda on that question. And we should not forget that UNESCO is developing in this moment the UNESCO Atlas of the World Languages based on the older project, the World Atlas of Languages in Danger. It's a very good opportunity for CIPSH, for Maya, and for your organizations to participate in that project. It's a very important challenge as well to establish that languages are resources for the sustainable development of humanity. We have now the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and languages are not mentioned as tools for development. It's one challenge for us too. And the last one is that we proposed a UNESCO chair, Language Policies on Multilingualism, trying to establish a strong academic network on that question, the connection between multilingualism, language policies, and sustainable development with 21 universities in 12 countries in 4 continents, and are very pleased to know that CIPSH has a strategy to have or to transform the UNESCO chairs, in that case our chair is a proposal, in CIPSH chairs. I think it will be a very concrete, a very specific work, and I suppose we are going to have very good discussions in all fields of our academic interests. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Frida Steurs. I'm a linguist and I represent CIPL, the International Linguistic Committee. You can read all about CIPL on page 4 of your handout, so I'm not going to repeat this, but just I would like to pose a challenge here. A challenge because it has been mentioned by some of the speakers that we need more digital databases. Professor Margaret Inoguet said it, other people said it. We need more material in order to preserve multilingualism and to be able to study languages and text material. Now, we think that we are now living in a very comfortable age of big data and large computer capacity, but still it is a very big problem that we cannot or we do not have enough linguistic resources at the moment. So we need to invest in that. And I was listening very carefully on Monday evening to the session presented by the Academy of African Languages, where they also have an African Language Technology Initiative. But you might think that in Europe, we are a bit privileged and that it's so easy because of the European Commission that supports multilingualism, that we have all the data available, but it is not. I can recommend you to read the report, which is called metanet.eu. Metanet is a consortium of computational linguists and professors who evaluated the state of the art of the digital language material available in Europe for the official languages. In other words, do we have enough text corpora for Czech, for Slovene language, for Dutch, for French, and so on? You would be surprised to see the results. We do lack a lot of important technology and important resources for many languages, let alone languages in emerging economies in Africa and in other parts of the world. So, if we look at this challenge, then there is the huge need, and this is what I would like to ask to CIPS, to help us to put more weight in the science agenda on studies on linguistics, digital humanities, and the need to get more money for this. Because even in Europe, with the Horizon 2020 projects, where there is a lot of research money, there are only, well, in fact, all the interest goes to the biomedical science and the engineering and technology science. Social sciences and humanities is completely left out. And we have to look for pieces of the puzzle in order to get a proposal granted. So please, more interest for social sciences and humanities. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Zhou Yunfan. I representing the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Unlike most of other member organizations of the CIPSH, we are a national academy in the CIPSH, which is a quite new phenomenon in this organization. But we have a very long history of cooperating with the CIPSH. The first the General Assembly we hosted in Beijing is back to, I think it was in 2004, it was 13 years ago, and we just had a second one in about 2 years ago. So this is a long history. You can read the little profile of the Academy on page 3 in the brochure. Just a very simple word about the Academy. We are social sciences and humanities. To draw a line, if I must do, between social sciences and humanities, on the humanities side, we have history, literature, philosophy, linguistics. We have about more than 10 research institutes on these subjects. we have also, of course, to be a member or a long-time partner with the CIPSH, we also have expectations from CIPSH. I think the first one is the link of the scholars from the academy and the scholars from other research institutions, but perhaps in the future some other stakeholders in China with the larger scholar communities with the, in the world. Our immediate link now is we have the president of the CIPSH from the Academy of Social Sciences, Professor Chao Ke-jing is from our Institute of Ethnic Literature. We also work through with many other member organizations of the CIPSH. So this is how we link with the CIPSH. We hope that we can develop more research projects, other exchange programs with CIPSH and through its member organizations. And the second expectation, I think, is a platform. I think CIPSH is a very good platform for Chinese scholars to exchange with scholars from other parts of the world in conferences like this and some other activities. This is also important as we now have, I think it's a political slogan popular in China, but also I think it's relevant in this case, is to cooperate to achieve a win-win situation. So together we win. I do believe in that. And third expectation, of course, we also would like to bring in to this organization and through this organization to many other institutions, a Chinese program. I'm very glad, Luca, you mentioned that in your organization of the next FISP conference, you think that the non-Western contribution to the history of thought is very important. I do believe that we would like to be heard or to be known in a very in a much better way. And maybe one last question from the of the CIPSH is that we hope that organization like CIPSH, because it's a multidisciplinary organization, we hope that it can lead to ask some bigger questions to an international debate, to for instance, the conditions of the human beings, the values, so to contribute to the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Chris Carey. I am on the bureau of FIEC, the Fédération Internationale des Associations d'Études Classiques. I won't say very much about us beyond saying that we share many of the experiences that others have spoken of. Foundation in 1948 in a traumatized world. And in an environment of idealism. Like many of the organizations here, we have a very wide disciplinary spread. We cover all aspects of the Greco-Roman world across the contemporary world, and through that, obviously, we would expect to make a contribution as a conduit for a number of areas of research and individual scholars who could collaborate, I think, very effectively across the piste of CIPSH activities. Another thing I would stress that aligns us with other organizations here is expansion. We began as a predominantly Eurocentric organization, but now the big areas of expansion for us as a discipline would include China, and South America. Latin America is a very big expansion area for us. I'd like just to flag some areas of challenge. Some have already been mentioned, but I think they do bear stressing. I think at both the government level and as a university level, and I do think one needs to think hard about university management and university culture in this practical operating environment, there is an increasing and embedded tendency towards instrumentalization of knowledge, and with that a kind of management of knowledge which is essentially practically driven. And I think we share with, say, physics or with biological sciences a need to make sure that the environment in which we work understands the need for a balance between blue skies work, whose practicality may take a long, long time, if ever, to materialize, and work which is of immediate practical benefit at the level of policy or the lived environment. For FIEC itself, we represent, our membership is association, and we need to make ourselves more representative. I'll be interested to hear if others share this. We will be restructuring our membership base in an interesting experiment at the end of this month in order to generate more income and allow us to raise the profile and the activities of FIEC. One final point, if I may, Chair, and that is the biggest problem I have encountered in dealing with humanities disciplines, and I speak as a former dean, a former deputy vice-chancellor, as well as a head of department in many institutions, is lack of confidence among the humanities. I have been on the stump in many contexts trying to persuade humanities colleagues to collaborate with scientists and social scientists in policy-driven activities, and I think the humanities needs to develop a stronger sense of its own importance in a global environment, and a context like this seems to me an ideal basis for developing that confidence.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Xiong Bingzhen. I'm from Chinese University of Hong Kong. I am the president of Asian New Humanities Net, ANHN, which is a new member of SIPSH. Our name is somewhat misleading because our members, although originated by organizations, humanities, faculties, and centers and institutes in Asia, we actually include members, institutions from Europe, North America, Africa, and Middle East. We have annual meetings every year, rotating among our member institutions, and we also organize projects. This time, we we organized 7 sessions and 4 plenaries. So I think you're seeing all of our colleagues, in these sessions presenting and in social moments. Our next annual meeting will be on Eco-Humanities, organized by National Sun Yat-sen University. And its dean, its provost is here. As I speak, I would like to share with you that we now, that we're new, we're active and happy, member to work with SIPSH. So this WHC World Humanities Conference is the first one, and we have to think of follow-ups to, carry out what's being discussed here. As I speak, the host of the next our ANHN meeting together with the executive committee of SIPSH has just arrived. The delegation from Xiamen University, led by its vice president, he's ready to address all of you and to explain why they want to have an academic conference and executive committee meeting with SIPSH on the theme of duties and challenges, Asian and global commitments. Wulangyu, the island across from Xiamen, has just become a World Heritage this year, level with Italy, 52 versus 52. In that project, they would take people to see the Marco Polo town, Caitong, which used to connect the world and help us think about remapping of humanities of the world. Thank you. He will be here, I think, to speak at 6:30 to 8 on sustainability of humanities research.
Thank you. I'm Rosa Bredotti. I'm representing today CHCI, the Consortium of Humanities Centers and Institute, page 3 of your brochure. We are new to SHIPS, and CHCI is a young organization started in 1988. It has currently 230 organizations in 23 countries and 46 of the states of the US. 75% of the membership is North American, including Canada, but we also have members from the EU, China, Japan, Korea, Singapore. CHCI is currently headquartered at the University of Wisconsin-Madison under the presidencies of Sarah Gaia. It was previously at Duke University under the presidency of the very regretted and very brilliant Srinivas Aravamudan. And before that, it was started by Harvard with Marjorie Garber as the first president. Affiliated members are very welcome to CHCI, and there are some regional networks that are working very closely, although they're autonomous, but working closely with CHCI. One of them you've just heard from is the Asian Network of the New Humanities, Director Professor Ping-Chen Hisyung. The other one you will hear from in a minute is SHIC, the European network. There is a very strong Australian network of new humanities and a budding African network, about which more in a minute, but we are missing, sadly, but maybe not unsurprisingly, the Arab world. CHCI has a very strong interdisciplinary character, based on the relatively new institutional structure that are the humanities centers. And to understand CHCI, you have to understand the genesis of humanities centers, institutes for the humanities, institutes of advanced studies, which have always been bridge builders. Bridge builders across the humanities at a time when, since the 1970s, many of the new areas of research in the humanities split from the disciplines or grew across, around, beneath, below, together with the disciplines. And I think those studies areas, gender studies, post-colonial studies, environmental studies, are motors of change, but very difficultly located in institutions. So humanities centers have always been a platform for that, connecting disciplines to interdisciplinary areas, comparing notes on how you do interdisciplinarity. We also connect humanities to social and natural sciences, connect humanities to society. There's a strong civic angle to all centers with the humanities, and try to be as international as possible in our approach. Activities of the CHCI, legendary, our annual General Assembly. There is one right now in Cape Town, and this is why the President, Sarah Gaia, could not be here. And every conference, of course, open to all members, is linked to every annual meeting is linked to a conference, and the host institution chooses the topics. Go and have a look on the website. They're quite really mind-boggling. We keep an international directory, and we have a very active website, but I think the most relevant part of our activities is the joint research project, the CHCI promotes and sponsors with multiple sources of funding, including but not only the Mellon Foundation. We have pioneered over the last 10 years environmental humanities projects. You can find out about them because they're being presented at this conference, notably the observatories of the Humanities for the Environment observatories presented by Paul Holm and Steve Hartman. We heard a little bit about this yesterday. And the medical humanities are also being presented by Ping-Chen Hisyung herself. We have also pioneered public humanities and global humanities, and of course, together with CenterNet, digital humanities. Last year, CHCI launched
Rosa, we're
African
running out of time here.
Map.
Rosa, we've just got a few minutes left, and there's still some people in the audience.
But you wanted to know what we can bring to the organization, so I think that this is relevant. And the Global Humanities Institute, but the African Humanities Map, I think, would be very, very relevant to many of you. Expectations in relation to SHIPS, to broaden our international networking, looking for members across the world, notably the Arab world, to provide further material for reflection on interdisciplinarity, and a lot to learn from the disciplines, a lot to give, we hope. Contribute to redefine the mission of the university today, Contrary to many prophets of doom, we are very optimistic about the future of the university. We heard yesterday from Professor Sriravastava that the university needs to go, that academic publishing is obsolete. We don't believe any of that. I think the university as a century-old institution can accommodate to the third millennium and play a very big role. We need to join forces, move on, embrace the challenges, stay upbeat. Firm belief, and this will be my biggest expectation towards SHIPS, the critical task of the humanities, the critical task of actually agreeing to disagree, consensual and mutual disagreement, not only the pursuit of harmonious agreement, but actually confronting the differences. Criticism is the key to democracy. Edward Said said it for us all. This is our biggest expectation in relation to SHIPS.
I couldn't agree more. Silvana Colella, President of the European Consortium for Humanities Institutes and Centers, and as the title of the consortium tells you, we have a similar structure to CHCI in the sense that membership is not individual but institutional. We have about 50, a little over 50 members located in 20 countries across Europe, and we value very much collaborations with other associations globally. We value networking and lobbying for the humanities. I know we're short of time, but I have just one big message for this assembly. ICHIC has already produced, thanks to the effort of my predecessors, a World Humanities Report. And it's freely available online. It was published by Palgrave 2015. Go online, download it, and read it. You won't regret it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I believe that we have the representative of the IGU, the International Geographical Union. And yes, please hand him the mic.
IGU is a young member of SIPSH, but it is one of the oldest international academic unions in the world. It was founded almost 100 years ago. And it integrates human and physical geography. It includes 41 commissions and task forces organized by subdisciplines like, for instance, geomorphology or political geography or geography of megacities and by problems. The unique feature of geography is in this integration, is this multidisciplinary character. That's why IGU is a member at the same time of ICSU and ISSC, which are now merging. And our objective in SIPSH is to profit of its multidisciplinary character, to foster our participation in new initiative, like, for instance, the initiative of the International Year of Global Understanding, promoted by IGU and coordinated by our colleague Benno Verren, who is among us. We are looking forward with optimism.